What's up, nerds? Welcome to the uh, gas exchange video for IB Bio SL. Um, okay, so I'm going to be going through this relatively quickly because I want to keep these videos around 15 minutes each. Okay, so I'm going to go through. Just going to start at the front. So this is D.6, option D, chapter 6, gas exchange. Okay, pardon my nose. I might be sniffing a little. I'm a little stuffy. Okay, so first idea as we go through this is we're going to be talking about lung tissue. Now, a lot of this we already talked about. We've got type 1, type 2 pneumocytes. They both have different jobs. Remember, type 1, they're very thin and they allow gases to move in and out. And then type 2 are more cuboidal and they sit on the type 1 like that. And those are the ones that produce that surfactant that keeps the alveoli from sticking to each other. Okay. So you will be required to understand how to recognize different pictures of lung tissue. Okay. So if you see a picture like this, I guarantee you they're going to say this is a picture of lung tissue. So don't feel like you're going to have to actually recognize it outright. But you've got your thin pneumocytes right here, type 1s. And then you've got your bigger ones. There's a type 2 right here. They're highlighting one right there for you as well. And then anytime you see like a collection of red blood cells like you see here, that's going to be a capillary with these little red blood cells. Okay. And then here's an electron micrograph. This already has it color coded. If we take that away, okay, it still has it for you. Okay. So that we already talked about lung tissue, so that's nothing new. So here's the meat of what's going to be this video in this lecture. Okay, an oxygen dissociation curve. All right, so hemoglobin is our best friend. Hemoglobin is the protein that actually carries oxygen in your blood and throughout your bloodstream, and this shows very nicely kind of what hemoglobin looks like and how it works. Okay, excuse me. So the way that hemoglobin is set up is that it is a tetrad. It has 4 different subunits that all come together, and at the base of each of those subunits is a small heme group that is what actually has the iron. That is that Fe that you see right there. That's what makes blood red, because when the oxygen binds with the hemoglobin, binds with that iron, oxygen and iron together make a red color. That's why rust is red. Okay, it's just oxidized iron. So what happens is that as hemoglobin binds with oxygen, each time it does, it actually makes it easier for the next one to bind. Basically, it opens up the protein sites and makes it easier to bind. So if you're in a highly oxygenated area, it's really easy for hemoglobin to carry a ton of oxygen because each one that it links to is going to allow it to link to more. Okay. Now, and that goes the opposite as well. If you're in a low oxygen area, it's going to drop some through just normal diffusion, and that's going to make it harder for them to bind. So an oxygen dissociation curve shows the relationship between oxygen levels and hemoglobin saturation. So here's our first oxygen dissociation curve. Now you've got BioNinja available too if you want to go in and get the details, but here's our curve. So the way that you read this is that percent oxygen saturation on this side. This is how much oxygen is actually going to be binding like with the hemoglobin. Essentially just like the saturation of oxygen in the bloodstream and everything going on from there. Oxygen partial pressure is a little bit different. Oxygen partial pressure, that's how much is actually how much pressure of oxygen is being put onto the area around it. Basically, how much oxygen is in the tissue itself. Okay, so somewhere down here is going to have very low partial pressure when there's not a lot of oxygen. Somewhere, say like the feet. Okay, and therefore hemoglobin is going to be dropping a lot of. Well, I mean, they're probably up here, but that's fine. Hemoglobin is going to be dropping a lot of its oxygen. Whereas somewhere up here, where there's a lot of oxygen, like the lungs, okay, up to 80% partial pressure, or excuse me, 80 millimeters of mercury, partial pressure up to 100, it's going to be much, much higher. Okay, so the way that you read this, and the way that you really have to understand this, is I want you to think about what we talked about when we went through the heart. Okay, remember that it's a circuit. So if we start here at the lungs, the first thing that's going to happen is that you're going to go to the heart. And then from the heart, you're going to go to the resting tissues. And as you go more and more and more through the body, okay, you're going to lose more and more oxygen. Now, probably around here is where the blood is actually going to be coming back to the heart. Okay, because I mean, you got to think about it. Your blood is going to be going. So let's say it's going to the feet. Your blood is going to be going down to your feet, releasing oxygen as it goes to the different tissues as it kind of spreads off into other capillaries and little spaces. Finally hits a capillary bed, releases a lot of its oxygen, then has to come back. And as it does, it's going to be super deoxygenated. Okay. And then from there, it's going to need to go back through the heart, back to the lungs, where it kind of boop, really quickly jumps all the way back up to this level until it does its journey again. So the way that I think about this, is that it's kind of like if your lungs are like an airport. Okay, hemoglobin's like the Uber, and it actually works really well because it's just a normal Uber, just like an Uber X. Okay, no, we're not fancy. No, there's no XLs here. We can't get that many people. So it can carry 4 oxygen molecules, 4 O2s. So in the lungs, it goes to the airport, it grabs 4 people, and then it drives those people where they need to go. Drop somebody off here, drop somebody off here, drop somebody off here. Finally drops the last person. And when it does, it needs to then go pick up more people. So it goes back to the airport to pick people up. That's the basic idea. Now, something that a lot of people forget, though, is that when you don't have any oxygen, what do you have? Well, you got CO2, because remember that you need to get rid of the carbon dioxide just as much as you need to get the oxygen. Okay? Now, when we look, one thing that you are going to have to know is the difference between fetal hemoglobin and adult hemoglobin. Okay, so for many reasons, hemoglobin of the fetus has slightly different molecular composition. Okay, therefore it has a higher affinity for oxygen, meaning it's going to be able to hold on to oxygen longer than an adult would. Okay, now this is only in a fetus. Let me be very clear. It's not in a baby. It is probably, or rather, it is in a newborn for the first like couple months. Okay, as you can see here, fetal hemoglobin almost completely replaced about 6 months. So in a newborn, the fetal hemoglobin is still there, but it's really just a fetus. And you got to think about why that might be, right? With no ability to bring in oxygen through lungs, the fetus is going to need to get all of its oxygen from its mother's blood supply running into its own, and it's going to need to be more careful about taking up oxygen from there. Okay, so as you can see, fetal hemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen. Okay, and then one other oxygen dissociation curve. So myoglobin is different than hemoglobin. It's a different molecule. It's similar. It is an oxygen binding molecule, but we find myoglobin, as you can see from the word myo. Myo means muscle. Okay, so it is made of a single polypeptide, only one heme group. Okay, so it's not going to be doing that like tetrad Uber thing. This is like a guy on a bike who's going to come pick you up from the airport. Okay, so its dissociation curve is very different. Okay, it's going to hold on to its oxygen for a really long time before it very quickly drops it. So, and another thing to keep in mind with these curves is that essentially these curves are not showing that, this is one single hemoglobin molecule. That's not how it works. This is the hemoglobin in your blood, in your body, or the myoglobin in your blood, in your muscles. Okay, what is in there, however much there is, this is approximately the kind of drop that you're going to be seeing. Okay, so basically all of the myoglobin, because it has a higher affinity, it stays saturated at lower oxygen levels. Okay, it's going to hold on to that oxygen supply until levels get real low, and then it's going to drop it right when they're really low. Now, the reason this is important for muscles is you got to think, okay, when you're exercising, you're using so much oxygen, you're doing so much cell respiration that you've got to get as much oxygen as possible. And at first, it's fine. At first, you've got some saturation in there, so the hemoglobin can just go, it can drop it, it's fine. But fairly quickly, your blood can't keep up. So, like we've talked about before, what do your lungs do? The ventilation increases, your heart rate increases to get the blood there quicker. But while the blood is working to get there quicker, what steps in? Myoglobin. Myoglobin is going to have some oxygen reserves, and while the hemoglobin is kind of taking its time to get there, it's going to drop the oxygen if it becomes in a really low oxygen environment. Eventually, though, you run out of oxygen entirely if you're just continuing to exercise, and that's what happens when, if you've ever been doing push-ups or if you've been like sprinting, especially if you've been sprinting and you have ever like hit a wall, not literally, but if you've been running and you do that thing where you're just kind of like run, 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 and then you're like, I cannot, as much as I want to, I cannot sprint anymore. My legs won't do it. They've run out of oxygen. The hemoglobin and the myoglobin only have so much oxygen to give you in so short of a time, and so your muscles stop functioning because they stop doing cell respiration. Okay? So that is the basic idea of oxygen dissociation curves. And so we are now going to talk about, kind of along with this, okay, carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is transported between the lungs and the tissues by one of three mechanisms. So not all of them, yes, all of them at the same time, but one single molecule takes one of these three mechanisms. Some is bound to the hemoglobin, okay, and is taken back to the lungs directly. Very small fraction gets dissolved in water and carried in solution, so the actually dissolved carbon dioxide, so a little molecule with water surrounding it. Okay, and then most of it actually diffuses into the erythrocyte, which is the red blood cell, and gets converted into carbonic acid. Okay, so here is the basics of this, and this is going to look more complicated than it actually is, okay? So what happens is that the carbon dioxide dissolves in, okay? And some of it combines with hemoglobin, as you see right here. Some of it dissolves, as I already said, or just dissolves directly. And then some of it actually combines with water that's in there and transforms into carbonic acid. Now, the reason that this may or may not be amazing is because that carbonic acid can dissociate. And if it dissociates, what you're going to see is you are going to see a reduction in pH in your blood. You're going to see that your blood gets more acidic. This is one of the reasons that carbon dioxide is toxic to your body. Why suffocation is such a big deal is because not only are you not getting enough oxygen when you are not breathing, but you're also actively making carbon dioxide, which is lowering the pH in your body. Now, you do have natural buffers in your blood that keep your pH from getting too low too quickly, but if it continues past a certain extent, it can cause some pretty serious damage. So this is the basic idea. You don't need to I don't want anybody to worry too much about the specific complexities. Just know carbon dioxide can straight dissolve. It can be bound to hemoglobin, but a large portion of it actually gets converted into carbonic acid. Now, when it comes to the lungs, okay, and we need to get rid of the carbon dioxide, what happens is that the dissolved CO2 just comes out of solution. It just, stops being dissolved. The stuff that's bound to hemoglobin comes off and dissociates because of diffusion. And with the carbonic acid, what you see is that, so back here, when it was being converted initially, when it was giving up a hydrogen, excuse me, when it was giving up a hydrogen, that hydrogen would do, that hydrogen ion, what that would do is that would actually dissociate the hemoglobin from the oxygen and kick the oxygen out into the tissues. Now here at the lungs, with oxygen coming in and binding to hemoglobin, that's kicking a hydrogen ion back off, which can then recombine, and you can see the reverse reaction so that carbon dioxide comes out of solution. And this might seem really complex, but it's very similar to cracking a can of soda, which has a lot of dissolved carbon dioxide in it, but beyond just the carbon dioxide that's dissolved, some of the carbonic acid in there is going to be converting back. Okay, so it's not that complex. So this is going to be all for this video, guys. I'm going to do a part 2 video, um, so that I can hit the rest. But until then, see you later. Stay studying. Gucci.